In the first few weeks of February 1836, Bowie, Travis, and Crockett worked in concert to improve the defenses at the Alamo. During the same time, Travis assumed command of the garrison, replacing Neal, who had been called home on personal business. The stage was now set, and the outcome would forever influence the future of Texas. A small, disorganized, inadequately supplied band of volunteers who had a willingness to fight prepared to square off with a well-equipped, well-financed professional army led by a man whose goal in life was the extermination of all American ideals in the Texas territories. When General Santa Anna and his army of approximately 5,400 men and 21 cannons arrived at San Antonio on February 23, 1836, he was pleasantly surprised to find that only 150 rebels defended the Alamo. Believing that he could crush the rebellious Texans in quick order, Santa Anna immediately lay siege to the mission. In short order, the noose was drawn tight around the Alamo, and Santa Anna's cannon began the arduous task of pounding the walls of the mission into nothing more than piles of dust and debris. By March 3rd, it was estimated that the Mexicans had lobbed over 200 shells into the Alamo. As vicious as the scene was, Colonel Travis claimed that not a single defender had been killed as a result of the steel rain that continuously pounded the compound each day. Almost to the very end, Travis and his battered ragtag force of freedom fighters believed in their hearts that General Houston and the Army of the People would come to their aid. Travis had sent numerous pleas for help to Houston via horse-mounted messenger in the days preceding the battle. This unrealistic belief that help was on its way was bolstered when 25 reinforcements made their way to the Alamo through the Mexican lines during the early morning hours of March 1st. Despite the arrival of fresh troops, the meager relief force could do little to turn the tide of the battle. Now, approximately 188 brave men were all that stood in the way of one of the finest armies ever assembled in Mexico. During the first 12 days of the siege, Santa Anna shelled the Alamo both day and night in a vain attempt to break the fighting spirit of the Texans. Much to the credit of David Crockett and his handful of Tennessee riflemen, the Alamo defenders gave as good as they got. Despite the deafening howl of exploding artillery shells, sharpshooters perched high in the battered parapets of the Alamo unmercifully dispatched any Mexican soldier who dared get within 200 yards of the beleaguered mission. This deadly game of cat and mouse continued unabated until the evening of March the 5th. At 10 p.m., Santa Anna's cannon, now firing from within 200 yards of the Alamo, suddenly fell silent. A pervasive feeling of dread settled over the exhausted Alamo defenders as the realization that they were truly on their own finally hit home. The cessation of hostilities was short-lived. At 5 a.m. on Sunday, March 6th, the Mexican army initiated the first of 3 all-out assaults on the Alamo. During the first attack, withering Texan counterfire from every part of the mission halted the Mexican advance. In the course of the bitter fighting, Travis was shot in the head and killed. Before the Alamo defenders could collect themselves, the Mexicans regrouped and rushed the Alamo a second time. This attack was also repulsed with staggering losses. Undaunted, Santa Anna merged his forces into a large, screaming mass and charged the ramparts of the Alamo a third and final time. When the Mexicans finally exploited a breach in the wood and earthen redoubt that had been built between the southwest corner of the chapel and a low one-story building used as a barracks, they swarmed into the open plaza, killing the retreating defenders. The indiscriminate hand-to-hand combat was gruesome. Bodies littered the ground. As the fighting subsided, groups of Mexican soldiers made their way from building to building, killing every Texan they found. One of those roving bands happened upon Jim Bowie on his deathbed in the Long Barracks. Bowie did his best to fight off his attackers, but his famed temper and Bowie knife was no match for the long reach of the Mexican bayonets. Bowie died alone, lying on a cot, his body punctured so many times that his blood covered his attackers from head to toe. It was at this time, according to one Mexican soldier, that a tall American of rather dark complexion, wearing a buckskin coat and a round cap made of foxskin with a long tail hanging down his back, believed to be David Crockett, met his heroic demise. In a scene made famous by John Wayne in the 1960s movie The Alamo, 20 angry Mexican soldiers reportedly cornered Crockett. The famed frontiersman fought like a ferocious bear, but in the end he was slashed in the face by a sword, and then he was viciously bayoneted by the assembled mob. In 90 bloody minutes, the battle for the dominion of the Alamo was over. Various published and unpublished accounts of the battle provided by survivors from both sides tell of the aftermath of the fighting. Within each of these accounts, there is a wealth of conflicting information. Some say 188 Texans were killed and that 30 non-combatants were spared. Others say that between 183 and 189 defenders were killed and that only Travis's slave and a handful of women and children were released unharmed. Stay tuned for part 3 of The Ghosts of the Alamo.